Alright, hello everybody, welcome back to another Anthem video, and today I wanted to talk about how can Anthem avoid making the same mistakes as Destiny. So by this point, you guys are probably familiar with the comparisons between Destiny and Anthem, and as someone who got the chance to play the game during the closed alpha, I can tell you that both Anthem and Destiny have a very similar aura, kind of like an MMO action RPG aura with a lot of grind and a lot of very spongy enemies, a big focus on progression and loot. So it's definitely not a stretch to compare the two, and we can pretty much agree that a lot of the pitfalls that Destiny went through are gonna arise at some point in Anthem's franchise career. So as we get closer to release, it's only natural to question what are the guiding principles that they're going to be using as a framework to resolve a lot of the issues that are going to arise in the future. And I think in order to come up with a good set of principles to guide the development, it's important to first of all look at the reason why people are playing games like this and figuring out what is the motivation that is driving the players. So there is a very good study by the Quantic Foundry that explains the map of gaming motivations, and it basically categorizes all gamers in three different groups: people who enjoy story design and fantasy, people who enjoy community, competition, excitement, and destruction, and people who enjoy completion, strategy, challenge, and power. And I think if we're gonna boil down the gaming experience of Destiny, which is the closest approximation that we have to Anthem at this point, I would say that this appeals more to the people who enjoy completion, challenge, and community, because a lot of the gameplay is focused on progression and loot, getting more powerful, having a strong gameplay loop, and also the community part. However, this is where things start getting a little bit muddier, because a while ago, it was revealed that Anthem is not gonna have a community hub, that the only hub that we have in-game is specifically designed for you as a player. It's not gonna be shared with other players, and it's designed to allow you to move through the story at your own pace. However, the design of this game is mostly geared towards a social experience, because you have team members, you have team parties, you do not have a chance to recruit AI party members, and it is an online only experience. You cannot play this online, so it seems like a lot of the systems are geared towards a social experience. However, a lot of the features that you would expect from such a game are missing, such as trading, such as a community hub, such as PvP. So before we can start defining what the guidelines should be, we first need Anthem to define what it wants to be, because at this point, less than a month from release, we still don't have confirmation on whether or not the game is going to have a community hub. Now, based on a lot of the feedback that Destiny got during its development process, I have compiled a list of guiding principles that could help the Anthem developers to make sound decisions when it comes to expansions and balancing of the game. So I feel like the first guiding principle should always be appeal to the hardcore players. So we're still far away from knowing what the hardcore players of Anthem are gonna look like. Regardless of what the hardcore player profile is gonna look like, it is safe to say that the hardcore audience is always gonna be smaller than the wider, more casual player base. So the first pitfall to avoid would come mostly from EA at this point, who would try to push Bioware to make gameplay and design decisions that would be geared more towards a casual audience instead of appealing towards the hardcore players that they would have during the first 6 months of the game. So once Anthem has a hardcore audience, they need to grab onto that audience and listen to the feedback that they have. Don't try to appeal to a wider audience, try to appeal to the hardcore audience. If they want more grind, if they want more complexity, then give them that. There is a very good chance at this point that EA is gonna be disappointed with Anthem's sales. Regardless of what the numbers are at this point, we saw this with Activision and Destiny, and we know that EA is even worse than Activision. They can only accept incremental exponential growth in terms of sales, and there is a good chance that Anthem is not going to deliver on the extremely high expectations that the publisher has for every single one of their games. My advice to Bioware would be focus on what the player wants, not on what the publisher is expecting from you. Now, here's where things get a little bit more complicated, as Bioware is owned by EA as opposed to Bungie and Activision's relationship, which is more of a symbiotic relationship. I think that's the best way to put it at this point, because Activision just benefits from the Destiny franchise. Whereas in this case, EA owns Bioware. It would be more difficult for Bioware to push against EA than for Bungie to push against Activision. However, I would still say try to keep it as customer focused and customer friendly as possible, because there's a good chance that if Anthem doesn't sell well, or even if it does, EA might push anti-consumer practices onto the game in the same way that Activision pushed it on Call of Duty. And what I mean by that is that Call of Duty released without any egregious microtransaction practices, and the reviews reveal that. However, months after release, they decided to add that into the game once the reviews were out. So there's a good chance that EA might do the same thing with Anthem. At this point, we know that there are no loot boxes in Anthem. This was revealed by the executive producer. We know that there's going to be only cosmetic microtransactions. However, that doesn't mean we're out of the woods yet, because there's still plenty of ways they can F it up at that point. So the devil is in the details when it comes to the implementation of microtransactions. So we're gonna have to wait and see. But my first guiding principles would be listen to the hardcore players, not the casual players, and try to appeal with your expansions and your rebalancing and your patches to the hardcore players. Now, my second guiding principle is more geared towards storytelling rather than gameplay, and it's based on the history of Bioware and games like Mass Effect and the Dragon Age series. And that guiding principle would be, don't take yourself too seriously. We still don't really know what the story of Anthem is. It seems from a first glance that the Anthem story is more of an afterthought. We still don't really know. However, my advice would be try to strike a balance between serious and gritty storytelling and levity. Try to follow the same storytelling principles of games like Mass Effect and Dragon Age, where you have high stakes, you have a strong narrative design. It gets gritty at times, but it's also important to have the jokes and the levity and the Joker one-liners, and to have the Dragon Age party banter. All of that stuff is important as well. So don't paint the whole story with one single brush, all right? Allow for these fun moments to appear, but don't go too far either. Don't make the game a joke with one-liners and cringy moments. Right? It's a balance. Now, my third advice would be don't make a sequel. And what I mean by this is focus on making Anthem a games as a service that follows an MMO approach. A lot of people agree that Destiny should have never had a Destiny 2. It should have always been a games as a service approach where they just add expansions, and I think with Anthem that should be the approach from the get-go. Now, there's a good chance again that if Anthem doesn't sell well, EA is gonna try to basically just give it another shot by rebranding it as Anthem 2 and just republish the game and see if it sells better that time. However, I would say commit to Anthem in a games as a service framework and just add expansions on top of it, add daily challenges, add monthly events that involve the whole community. However, as I mentioned before, the community aspect of Anthem is still in question, so we're gonna have to wait and see. And tied to this guideline would be avoid the annualized schedule. Activision pushed it on Destiny and it didn't work, so I would say fight as hard as you can against an annualized schedule. Now, I've always been a fan of Bioware games. I have followed the company and the people who work on it for many years, ever since Mass Effect 2, and throughout the years, of course, the company has had ups and downs. The Mass Effect 3 ending, Casey Hudson's departure, the Mass Effect Andromeda debacle. It's been a long ride, and the faith in the company has dwindled for a long time. It's been on the decline, and a lot of people think that Bioware is not what it used to be. Now, Casey Hudson is back. They're working on Dragon Age 4, and Anthem is about to be released. So it is no secret that a lot of people are very skeptical of this game. And I, of course, include myself in that group because I'm not 100% sure that Anthem knows what it wants to be. But I would love Bioware to prove us all wrong. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.